I would like to welcome you guys to 100 States. We are Wisconsin's largest co-working community. A little bit about myself. I'm Christian Kaczmarczyk. I'm the operations assistant here, and I help run things smoothly at 100 States, from onboarding to offboarding members. But enough about me. I want to thank you for coming out today. Startup Grind is one of the many events that we host here at 100 States. A little bit more about 100 States. We are a workspace for freelancers, entrepreneurs, business people, startups, and all the sorts of the like. Anyone that's looking for a new community to interact with people, talking about business ideas, just hanging out, meeting new people in the community. We also offer events like Startup Grind, and we also offer resources for people to continue to grow their business and to meet others in the professional network. But like I said, Startup Grind is one of our events that we host, and right here Paul will take us off.
All right. Thanks, Christian. So, all right, thank you. Yeah, so show of hands, how many is this your first event, Startup Grind? Awesome, very cool. Thank you all for coming out. Just a quick one, I'm sure you're confused why there's no sound coming out of here. We do a live stream video, thanks to Derek and Catherine, our friends at Field 59. They do an awesome job videotaping, so that's kind of where this is going, if you're confused why there's no sound going out here. So just thank you all for coming. My name's Paul Gerhardt. I'm the director of Startup Grind Madison. So Startup Grind, it's a global organization. There's chapters in 225 cities around the world. And so it's a pretty big thing. We've run the Madison chapter here for about a little over a year now. And so basically what we're all about here is to educate, inspire, and connect Madison's entrepreneurial community. So we have 3 values, just wanted to run through them real quick. First one is make friends, not contacts. So we're all here not to, the goal here isn't to see how many LinkedIn connections you can get tonight. The goal is to see how many actual connections you can get tonight. So we're all kind of in the same boat, we're all on the same journey, so just make friends. The second one is give, don't take. That's just kind of like we all have something to give, whether it's knowledge or an opinion or a connection. So just kind of help each other out. Last one is help others before yourselves. So kind of in that same vein, we're all kind of in this entrepreneurial journey. There's enough competition out there already, so let's just try and help each other as much as we can. So without that, I just want to introduce Forrest. Tonight we're featuring Forrest Woolworth of Per Blue. It's a mobile gaming company here in Madison, a few blocks away, located a few blocks away. So Forrest, he's gotten a number of awards over the years, just a couple. He's gotten an M-List award. He was awarded by Wisconsin Alumni, the Forward Under 40, and then Per Blue themselves, they've gotten a number of awards, including Top Developer by Google. So let's give it up for Forrest Woolworth.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thanks, Forrest. Thank you so much for coming out. I guess, let's just jump right in. Could you just tell us what is Per Blue and what do you guys do?
So Per Blue is a mobile gaming studio based here in Madison. We make games for iPhone and Android. We were started back in 2008. And we make primarily role-playing, RPG, and strategy mid-core games that use a freemium revenue model. And our games are played by, I think, probably over 15 million people around the world right now. All from a studio here, like Paul said, just a few blocks away, east of the Capitol Square. We have a team of about 30 full-time people here in Madison. And we're a fully independent studio, meaning we do everything. We own all of our games, all of the full IP and stuff like that for the games we make, and run the games all the way from design to developing them to publishing and launching, and then live ops over their entire life cycle as they're live. And then have a team, a cross-functional team that does all those things. So everything from software developers to game designers to QA to support to marketing, UI artists, all that kind of stuff, all on our team here that works with us.
And so how did you guys all start on the About Me page? It says you guys were started in a college apartment in 2008?
Yeah, so we bootstrapped in the early days. So all of us knew each other in undergrad. Most of us were computer engineering and computer science double majors or one of the two in undergrad here at UW. And all knew each other in classes, and then sometime, I don't know, close to senior year or so, some people started working together on what became our first game called Parallel Kingdom, which was a location-based role-playing game. And we decided to basically, after working on that part-time for about a year or so, most of us were graduating in about 2009, and decided to pursue it full-time after that. So there was a set, probably around 5 or so of us, that said, hey, let's give this a shot, and started working out of our CEO, Justin Beck's college apartments, about a block from engineering campus for the first year or so, then moved over to South Park Street and occupied a couple home offices where our team gradually grew from us to probably close to 10 people while we were still working out of a house, basically. And so, yeah, bootstrapped in the early days for no pay type of thing, working out of a living room of a college flat. And made games way back in the early days of what is now the giant mobile gaming industry. So
That's such an awesome story. How, so the name Per Blue, why Per Blue? Why not like Per Green or Per Red?
well, blue is the best color, obviously. No, I mean, I wish there was like a really sentimental, like, oh, this is like the justification. But so the kind of the justification, I guess, for it is, so with mobile games, comparing to like traditional like PC and console games where you're tied to a desktop or something clunky like in your basement, with mobile games you can play them anywhere, including outside under the clear blue sky was kind of the idea. So there's kind of the blue sky kind of connection, and then Per was a prefix that was short and was and the whole thing was easy to spell and say, and the URL was available and all those very important
That's
things.
the most important part. Yeah.
And then it just stuck. Yeah.
So when you guys were first starting this out, you didn't take a job after college. Like, were there times in the first year or so that you guys thought that this might not work out and you might have to go get regular jobs and kind of break up the team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was, that was always kind of a concern when we made the decision to actually, hey, let's give this a shot versus taking jobs on the West Coast at Microsoft or Cisco or Google or wherever else. That was a concern at that decision point, but then also throughout the company's history, we've had ups and downs, and in particular the first year or two when not really making, we didn't take home any paychecks, so it's like, well, you're just kind of sitting on savings. And the good thing about that was coming from college and undergrad, like you have a really, really low burn rate as far as what like expense you can live on. So you can live on like almost nothing, 10 grand a year easily.
Yeah.
And if you're able to kind of have that as a stockpile, essentially, you can really have a long runway, especially if you keep your burn rate really low as an individual. So that kind of definitely crossed our minds, throughout this process as we didn't launch the revenue model in Parallel Kingdom, our first game, until about a year into it, and we weren't sure at the time. So that we actually launched a free, the freemium, what is now the freemium revenue model, which has a virtual currency in the games that you buy through in-app purchase. So you spend $3, $5, $50 at a time, and you get this premium currency in the game to spend on things like speed ups or customizations, which is pretty common and standard across a lot of the mobile games now. But at the time, back in 2009, this was not very common, and so the fact that we were launching our game with this very risky at the time revenue model was a very uncertain thing, and so when the day we launched the big update that had the revenue piece into it, it was kind of a very challenging and difficult thing of like, if we wake up tomorrow and there's still no money in our bank account because nobody's paid us anything yet, we're done, because there's we can't just keep doing this for no pay. So but luckily it seemed to work, and there was some progress, and then kind of worked from there. So
yeah, and I think like with the whole, like when you tell stories of like an entrepreneur or something, I feel like the whole idea is like you did this, and then so like you had an idea, and then you formed a product, and then it became successful. Like I feel like that's kind of how entrepreneurs are portrayed. Personally, I think success is kind of more like this. Like it ebbs and flows. That must have been your experience? That's
very true. Yeah. So I think Dimitri Martin has a sketch on this that has like what people tell of success is like, obviously straight up, whatever the good way is from your perspective. Straight up and to the right is obviously how all things happen, but in reality, it's very much a squiggle that goes up and down and backwards, and maybe a little bit forward, then probably backwards again, and then maybe back up a little bit. So it is very much that, whether you're looking at just the company perspective, like the employee base, the product success, like all those. There's so many complicated pieces and all this stuff that there's not an up and to the right kind of success case. That's kind of the story that's the easiest to tell and the most fun to tell. It's kind of difficult to always get up and say all the really challenging things, which us as entrepreneurs is actually really important to also talk about those challenging things and help each other through those, and not just kind of make it seem that everything is always rosy, because it's not a lot of times, and that's those tough times are like the really, really important times to kind of to help each other get through and kind of lean on each other essentially. Yeah.
I've heard somebody describe entrepreneurs as like it's your best day of your life and your worst day of your life in the same day.
That happens a lot. Yeah. Because and that you also really have to learn, and that's really difficult to do, but learn to like savor the successes, because they do seem so short-lived, and there is no like big end game. Like you never get to a point and you're like, aha, we're successful. Like we can just kind of kick back. We've achieved all of our goals for the next 3 years, and we're just gonna call it a year. Like that never happens. Like so, you always kind of have to appreciate and cherish like everything from small successes to big ones, because there's a chance I mean, I've had days like this, a number of days like this, where you have an amazing, awesome success, one moment, like again, whether it's a product success, whether it's metrics or KPI kind of things, or an awesome, hire that you got, and then the next, like literally 10 minutes later, like something's burning and like completely on fire, not literally, but hopefully, but something is super bad happened. You're like, okay, I got to fix this problem now, and you kind of forget about that. Oh, this awesome thing just happened, and so it's really important to make sure you kind of cherish those other moments to kind of make sure to help you get through the other really rough parts as well. And you're always finding new problems to solve. Like that's kind of what I've been conditioned to. I think that's what ultimately, as an entrepreneur, happens is like you're just conditioned to like solve problems and like put out fires, and like that's kind of what happens, and you kind of get into that this success. I got this accomplished, now onto this thing and fixing this thing and then this thing, and it's just like a series of things to problems to solve, which is kind of like engineering, but
never stops.
Yep.
Yeah. So you mentioned you guys came out with like a unique revenue model. Like what would you say makes PurBlue unique? I mean, you guys got some awards by Google, top developer. You were voted Madison's favorite tech startup by the Ithmith. So what would you guys like? What makes you unique? I mean, you guys are obviously doing something right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our space, mobile games, is really interesting in that one, it's extremely, the whole industry as a whole is extremely fast moving and evolves very quickly, and it's a very global industry. So we are competing against the top mobile gaming companies in the entire world every single day. It's not about being the best mobile gaming company in Madison or Wisconsin or the best or even the US. Like our biggest competitors are in Asia, in Scandinavia, across the US, and like that's who we're competing against. We need to be world class in what we're doing and really and have a really high, be really successful and good at what we do. And I think one of the things that we've realized that really makes us unique in that is so one, we're a fully independent studio, and for our size and I guess the level of success we've had is actually pretty unique, especially if we're only having 30 people. Like Supercell and Zynga and all those guys have hundreds, even thousands of employees, and we have 30, and we're competing against these same other studios. And I think the other thing is just the engineering focus of our team is pretty unique that we've realized. So a lot of these other studios don't have a really strong engineering and technical team and core, and especially for mobile games, they're very deep and complicated from a tech perspective, and having a really strong technical team is really important. And if you have a dev team that turns over every 6 months, I don't know how you can have a reliable backend and in tech infrastructure as a whole. And that's one of the big things that we've found as a very unique for us in our industry in particular, is that we have a very strong tech foundation and culture essentially that we build on. And I think a lot of that is one goes back to our founders. All of our founders were very technical focused, and the other one I think goes back to just being in Madison. Madison, we've got access to amazingly talented developers that really enjoy working with us, and I think our company would be a lot different if we were in San Francisco, for instance. Okay. I think the tech and sort of the positioning industry wide is kind of the very unique thing that we've realized.
And so, when you guys started in 2008, like, what did the mobile gaming space look like? I mean, the iPod Touch was out. There were a number of other platforms already out there, and then the iPhone was launched in 2007. Like, was there like a ton of developers rushing to do mobile gaming, or what was that like at that time?
So it was very different now. I mean, there's over 1 million apps on each of the app stores now. Back then it was in the hundreds or thousands maybe, but it was very different in that mobile games were not necessarily thought to be what mobile devices, smartphones were going to be used for. So in particular, like when we first started developing for Google Android, before Android actually came out, Google had a developer competition that tried to encourage developers to make apps for Android, and all of the ones that won, they were like, I don't think there were any games in the top. It was all like calculator apps and like functional things. So most people at the time thought that smartphones and apps on phones would be very functional focused, and nobody saw how big mobile gaming would actually be. And now mobile games is now a $30 billion industry globally, and very quickly growing. And it's, I think, about 85% of all mobile revenue is from games. Wow. Which was no one saw that coming early on, and that kind of gradually just kind of blew up as far as the mobile gaming industry as a whole goes. So
Did you guys think that you wanted to go into mobile gaming originally, or did you see smartphones and think like this is the next big thing, or what was your kind of take at that time?
yes, a little bit of both of those essentially. So yeah, at the time it was, we saw this new smartphone, the iPhone in particular had been out for a few months, and we saw this platform, and Google had just announced Android, and we were like, this is really cool and there's a lot of potential. So like, what can we do with this? Is kind of how we got to the brainstorming of like making a mobile game product, what became Parallel Kingdom, and then kind of also then just seeing this, and this is also factored into our decision to, to turn down jobs and actually pursue this whole PurBlue thing and give it a shot, was around the market opportunity and the timing essentially. So we looked at it as like, this is like 1994 for the internet essentially, of like kind of seeing how much potential there could be, not really knowing what the end game was, but just knowing that this is a huge platform with a lot of potential, and being positioned at a time, uniquely positioned at the beginning of it to say, hey, let's try to see where this goes. If you look at it from like a macro market perspective of like where you want to build your company, and we were like, this is a lot of potential, let's see what happens essentially, and then build a product, build a team, and ultimately a company that was going to play in that space.
That's great. So like now, what does the mobile gaming industry look like now? Are there a few big players like Zynga and these other guys, or are there still a lot of small development teams, or how has it changed, I guess?
Yeah, so it's definitely matured a lot. So it kind of had a big ramp up in the early days, so like 2009 to 2012 or so, like kind of at the height of it was kind of like the Zynga heyday, like back literally heyday. That was kind of the peak, and then there was kind of this trough that happened after kind of Zynga's IPO kind of sputtered a little bit, and it was kind of this trough industry-wise, and now it's much more in the upswing again, but it's a much more mature market. It's not like the Wild West of like, hey, this is a cool thing, let's just place bets everywhere and make all the random stuff. It's the people that are here now are much more mature, and kind of really kind of essentially you have to have a lot of expertise and a lot of capital essentially to be successful now, I think. And there is a lot of consolidation as the market matures, especially at the top. That's both industry like M&A wise, but also from a player perspective, like just because like so much of our industry is driven essentially by like the top apps list that I believe, I don't know the exact ratio, but it's only the top, whatever 1% of apps in general make up 90. This is a made-up number, but it's approximately like this kind of thing. Make up like 90% of the actual revenue, 90+% of the revenue that actually comes in. So there's a lot more concentration, and at the top of the developers as far as apps and is pretty clear in games and game developers goes. And so there's kind of this kind of a really, really long tail of people who, even though mobile games is a pretty accessible market to be in, like anybody can go launch a game or an app, you need a lot of expertise to make a good app, and like consumers' expectations are continuing to rise as far as like what a mobile game should look and feel and be ultimately. Like those expectations continue to increase, which makes costs to make a mobile game to be always to continue to increase as well, and so those have increased a ton as far as the expertise needed to actually develop those games, the timeline needed for those games, the resources needed for those games, all that kind of stuff. So they're much more expensive to make. And then the other big important piece of the equation is discoverability. So like you can launch your game easily, but finding eyeballs and people to actually play it is extremely difficult because there are a million other apps out there. Like you need to have discoverability, you need to have essentially proven ways of where you can reach these new people and players ultimately to play your game and find your game, and a lot of it comes down to essentially capital and being able to deploy marketing capital to advertise and find users essentially. So those are the two big things. It's a lot more expensive to make the games, it's a lot more expensive to find the users and build a user base, and So it's
kind of like Google, where like if you're on that first search page, then you're golden. Otherwise, you're a nobody.
Otherwise, there's a million other pages that no one's ever going to look at, essentially. So yeah.
So I'm curious to know like how you guys develop games, and like how do you come up with your next idea, and how do you decide I'm sure everybody has their idea for the next game. How do you decide on which one to put all your time and energy into?
Yeah, so that's a really challenging thing in general. So our approach is very much market-driven, so we want to make a game ultimately that will be successful in the market. So we design kind of from the market backwards. So we look at the market, we see what's successful out there and why, and make sure the game that we're going to make next fits into the market somewhere, and there's a home for it, and there's kind of kind of to mitigate as much of the market risk as possible, whether that's relating to the theme of the game, like whether it's a pirate game versus a sci-fi game, to the type of game, whether it's an RPG or strategy game, like kind of genre, kind of all those different angles, and kind of putting all those pieces together, and kind of then working backwards to say, okay, like what is the game we're going to make here, and how are we going to mitigate as much risk as possible and make sure we know where we're innovating, and being really, really selective about where we're innovating, because you can easily make something that you have, there's so many variables and knobs and stuff you can tune, whether it's game mechanics, whether it's game economy, whether it's the brand and the theme. You can't just like go all out on all those knobs, because when you launch it, you have no clue what's broken and why. So you kind of have to kind of make sure you're taking very, very closely watched risk and innovate, kind of in a constrained box. So you know where you're innovating, you know where your risk is, and try to mitigate as much of that as possible, so you have the best chance at market success as possible once you launch, because it's expensive to make the game and it's expensive to put money to market the game. So
once you guys have made the game, how do you go about marketing it?
So a lot of performance-based mobile ads. So the little banner ads you see in the bottom of other free apps and stuff, we buy a lot of that inventory. So that's been a very core piece of our user acquisition strategy. More recently, as of a few months ago, we've actually started doing national TV ad buys. So we're actually buying TV placements on national channels, which is crazy. Like, I never thought I'd be doing that a year from now. But so if you watch ESPN2, ESPN News, Spike, TBS, I think Comedy Central now, a couple other ones. Dragon Soul is our new game. There's spots airing on those stations nationwide. So it's crazy to see a commercial that I helped produce and make in like a 2-week period that we were rushing to kind of get out there, next to I don't know, an insurance commercial or like a football game or whatever. And I get people coming up telling me that, hey, I saw your commercial for your game on TV, and I was randomly, in the Great Dane the other week, and I happened to just look up at a TV, and there was our commercial. It's like, this is so cool. So that's kind of we've been doing some more of that, and a lot of mobile ads, and Facebook, all that kind of stuff too. So
I'm sure that's a sign of the maturity of the industry.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
When you guys are making a game, is the best job in your, I don't know if this is one specific job, but is the best job the video game tester? I would imagine everybody fights over that job.
Yeah, it's kind of...
Is that everybody's job in a way?
It's everybody's job in a way, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we do have some QA people which kind of focus on essentially kind of the testing stuff. But I don't know, I think all the jobs are good jobs. All the jobs are the best jobs. It just kind of depends on your interest and kind of the stage of the game and like all that kind of stuff. But I think all of them have their perk, whether, more on the developer side of things, more on the marketing side of things. Like, there's really all of the jobs kind of relating to what we do are all solving really cool problems and really cool problems, and have a really interesting, very big reach as far as the impact of what they have, I think. So,
is there any one part of the design or the product design process that's like the most challenging? Like, is it the figuring out the market fit, or is it figuring out the design of it, or is it all challenging? I guess
it's all challenging, I guess, is the short version. But I think kind of the two main most challenging points would be kind of narrowing down to what the actual, essentially the pitch for the product is, like taking in all those market variables and like kind of coming up with like the one page of like, this is the kind of the vision for the game we're going to make and where it fits in the market, all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably a really difficult part. And I think also then kind of in the test market stuff, so like tuning on balancing and all those little details of like, those are kind of all little knobs you kind of have to turn, but in a controlled way. Like, that's also very challenging and very, very detailed work that takes a lot of understanding of like how all this stuff integrates, because it's not just isolated variables that you can just kind of tune and then watch a variable and be like, okay, that's correct. Like, all these things, since it's like it's pretty much a straight up economy in the game, all these things interact, and so changing one has impacts on all the other ones a lot of times, or on ones you didn't even know it was going to impact. So it's really difficult to do that part and make it balanced and optimize and all that stuff, I think, too. So.
And you talked a little bit before about the revenue stream of like having like in-game currency. Is that how you guys make most of your money? Like, is that like the popular way of making money from these games now?
I think that's kind of emerged as the standardized model to follow in general for mobile games, in particular for it's mostly more like the mid-core, more involved games for sure, like RPGs and strategy games. So that's where most of our revenue comes from, is the in-app purchase for the virtual currency stuff in games, which is the freemium revenue model type model. So that's where most of it is from, and that's kind of the core. essentially, literally the core economy, and the game is built kind of around that as one of the core resources. That's a big piece of it. So.
This is kind of a more broader question, but what do you guys like about making games? Like, have you always been into video games?
So I've liked all the way, I don't know, back for a long time. Like, I've always been a big fan of like all the sim games, and kind of like SimCity was one of my core things, and Roller Coaster Tycoon. Like, I like to build things.
I loved Roller Coaster.
Yeah, so like I like those kind of games. Also, Age of Empires, strategy kind of games like that, I really, really enjoy. Everybody on the team is very much into games. I'm much more than me. So there are very, very passionate gamers across the company. All across, traditional console kind of games, PC games, mobile games, and then also like in the board game space. So there's even like a board games group that meets up, I think weekly or monthly, and they actually make their own paper-based board games from scratch and like design games from that. And those are actually some of like the core game mechanics we'll actually use in prototyping for our real games. We'll actually often like prototype them in a paper form, because a lot of these core game economies and mechanics are actually very much you can make a model of them in paper and prototype it out. It's the exact same mechanics. At the core of like traditional kind of paper-based board games. That's again, did I answer the question? Yeah.
Good.
So a lot of games, but
cool. And where would you say the mobile game industry is going, or maybe the game industry? Like, where would you say like it's going? Like in 5-10 years, like is virtual reality going to be a big thing for you guys, or what do you think is next for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of still movement and growth in the mobile space in particular. I think PC and console is still going to have a pretty strong place. It's not seeing a lot of growth right now, but it's not going to go away for sure. It's going to be there. Mobile is what's driving the growth for the gaming industry as a whole right now in the past few years. So there's a lot of growth there. I think in mobile in particular, as smartphones in all over the world keep getting large, bigger market penetration, all that kind of stuff. As tablets become more commonplace and stuff, and people like just use them more. Like, just think of how integrated tablets and smartphones are in your guys' daily lives right now compared to like when we started PurBlue, even 3 or 4 years ago. Like, that was not the case. And again, that was not a given thing that everybody is going to have a smartphone in their pocket, and even a couple years down the road. Like, we had thought at some point that was going to happen at some point, but like 10-15 years down the road. But the pace that happened was crazy. And I think probably most people here, does everybody here have a smartphone? Who does not have a smartphone?
Singling them out.
Yeah, so that's crazy.
I had a flip phone until 2 years ago, and I was very proud of it. But I always got singled out in class. I remember being in like lecture halls, and somebody would ask that question, and I would be like, there'd be me and one other guy in like a 300-person lecture hall, and we were the only flip phones left.
It was the exact opposite just 7 or 8 years ago when we started. So, but I think mobile has a lot of upsides still, but then also stuff like VR I think has a lot of potential. I think it's still pretty early market stage to be like from a commercial viability perspective, but I think a couple of years down the road, I think it's for sure there's a lot of interesting stuff there. There's a lot of options and opportunities as gaming just becomes more accessible and kind of beyond the traditional gamer demographic that mobile kind of has unlocked, and I think other technologies will unlock too, and just make it more approachable and accessible. Yeah.
I'm just curious to know, like, how many people here have tried like a virtual reality headset, like whether it's like Oculus Rift or Google Cardboard or anything? Oh, actually, that's a lot of people. I just tried Google Cardboard like a week ago. I'm so obsessed with it. Like, that is the coolest thing. Just a piece of cardboard, 2 lenses, and a smartphone. Download a free app. I don't know. I just think that's so interesting. Yep. Do you guys have any plans to make like a VR game anytime soon, or not for a while? Nothing
on the horizon for sure, but it's definitely something that a lot of our employees are kind of playing with on the side and interested in. But we'll see what happens.
Sure. I'm just curious to know what's your favorite game that you guys have made personally. What do you like? I'm sure you're attached to Parallel Kingdoms because it was the first. But
yeah, it definitely holds a special place in all of our hearts for sure. I don't know. I guess I like strategy games as a whole. So like Titan Empires, Greed for Glory are two big strategy games that we did. But I really like, I don't know, right now it's really Dragon Soul. Like, that's what most of us are playing a lot of, and that's the newest game, but it's also kind of the most exciting because it's a big, fast-growing game, and it's been really cool to see that, to be part of that, and then see it grow and all that kind of stuff. So,
how long does it take for what's your product development cycle like? Like, how long from design to final production?
Ranges probably 6 months to a year in general, probably around 9 months on average, plus or minus a few months basically. So that also is getting longer. I think in the earlier days, a dev cycle is probably 3 to 6 months, 3 years ago or so, and that's getting longer just because again they're getting more involved. There's more assets. They're more complex. All this kind of stuff.
I'm sure people are expecting more now.
And yeah, exactly. Consumer expectations are always being pushed up there too. So yeah, yep.
So I kind of like to transition now. You're in charge of a ton of other projects. You run Capital Entrepreneurs. You help out with Forward Fest, and you're involved with Starting Block.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd just like to kind of touch on each one of those briefly. So like, what is Capital Entrepreneurs all about?
Yeah. So Capital Entrepreneurs is a community group for Madison area entrepreneurs. So kind of a community peer kind of support group essentially, and ultimately just kind of a network of other entrepreneurs around town. So we started that back in 2009. This is around the same time with Purblue and most of us. There's a group of us graduating from UW, all kind of doing our own set of startups and ventures here in Madison and staying in Madison. We wanted a way to stay in touch with each other because there were a couple of good resources on campus, but we were graduating. We're like, well, hey, now what do we do? How do we stay in touch with each other? How do we meet other new entrepreneurs? And so decided to basically we should go email all of our friends who are going to be in town and we're entrepreneurs and said, hey, let's grab a beer, talk about entrepreneurship stuff and just see what happens. So did that in May of 2009. Met up downtown on the square here, had a beer, and said, hey, that was fun, let's do it again next month. And it's happened every month since then, and that's kind of what merged into Capital Entrepreneurs, which is now has over 400 member entrepreneurs around Madison, and I think is kind of the seed for a lot of what's happened in the last 5 years here in the Madison entrepreneurial community. I think was kind of tied in that group of people that kind of was hanging out around Madison that were starting companies around that time, and ultimately were kind of involved in the early days of Capital Entrepreneurs in particular, and are now there's such a different ecosystem now than it was 5 to 6 years ago, and so many awesome things have emerged, startup resource-wise in Madison and startup company-wise in Madison, and it's just a very, very different space now than it was when we started Capital Entrepreneurs and when we started Purblue. So, when
you guys started Capital Entrepreneurs in 2009, were there any other meetups like that, or were there other resources that you guys would go to, or what was the
there wasn't
the scene like?
There wasn't a lot. I mean, I think Merlin Mentors existed around then. There was some campus stuff, but there really wasn't much. I mean, that's one of the core reasons we started it, was because there was nothing really out there. There was a couple, kind of more business groups, but what happened at a lot of those was when you would go there as an entrepreneur and everybody else there found out you were an entrepreneur, they would all come and sell you stuff, which was not any fun as an entrepreneur, to be bombarded by lawyers and accountants and all that kind of stuff. No offense to the lawyers and accountants in the room, but we wanted to kind of create a safe place for other entrepreneurs to kind of make sure they had a peer group of other entrepreneurs to be around, and kind of have essentially as their peer group, and kind of to establish that sort of the core social foundation that I think is really, really important for all these other things to build off of. Because if you don't have people that you can be around that are your social, that are kind of a foundation for you socially, that are kind of like you or doing similar things to you, or that you think of as like a peer from in particular this case as like an entrepreneur who's starting a business that's kind of like mine, it's really easy to feel lonely and then to feel disengaged and then to move. And so I think that sort of that tie, that social connection and the foundation, sort of like a social fabric, is critical to kind of forming that foundation, which then other things can build on, like other resources, whether that's all the awesome co-working spaces like 100 State and others that have emerged around town, hacker spaces like Sector 67, accelerators like Generator, and all these other things that have emerged now. That's so important, and kind of binds all these things together, I think, and also and all the Forward Fest stuff and all this stuff. So it was not a lot of resources then, but now there are a lot of awesome things happening, which is cool. So.
I would kind of feel like you feel like a founding father in a way, I feel like you kept so many people in Madison over the years and contributed to the community here. How would you say the community's changed? 5-6 years ago, there weren't that many people here. Has it accelerated in the last few years, or has it changed recently?
I think it's accelerated. I think there's definitely a lot, just volume of people involved in startups and entrepreneurship and tech, especially the tech side of it. I think it's definitely accelerated a lot over the last probably 2 to 3 years. And there's just a lot of people, whether it's, I think, and also tying back to campus, UW campus, I think that's also a key piece of, a key essentially feeder into this entire ecosystem is a very, very important piece of it. It was when back 5 to 6 years ago, when I was coming into this space as well, if it weren't for UW, I would not be in Madison. A lot of my other peers that are running a lot of the big tech startup companies in Madison would not be in Madison. And so a lot of the stuff still goes back to UW, and that's also critical now as far as that tie back to UW and making sure that there's a strong, essentially, pipeline to the broader Madison entrepreneurial community. And yeah, so I think there's a lot more of those younger people coming from UW realizing there's something going on in Madison, that they can start a company in Madison or join another startup company in Madison. They don't have to go to Silicon Valley to do a startup. Like, that's becoming much more of a widely accepted thing, that you don't have to just go to the Valley to do a startup. This stuff exists in Madison, and you can choose to stay here and launch this. And there's resources and there's communities here for you to join and ultimately help you be successable. So
that's great. Could you talk a little bit about Forward Fest and what that is and what's your involvement with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Forward Fest it's an 8-day entrepreneurship festival that happens each August. So we started that back in 2010, I believe. And so basically the idea is Forward Fest serves as an umbrella of different events that happen over this 8-day period. So last year there were 34 different events that happened over 8 days at the end of August. And these are events that range from day-long conferences, either tech conferences or social good conferences or food startup conferences, to happy hours, to I don't even know, there's a whole bunch of different events that happened last year.
We had an event for that.
Yep,
we interviewed the Zendesk CEO. It was a lot of fun.
Yep. So there's a lot of variety of different events that happen all around town, all mostly independently organized by different groups that are involved in kind of the entrepreneurial space, but then it's all organized underneath the Forward Festival umbrella. So it kind of like brings things together and kind of says, hey, here's this concentration of 8 awesome days of things happening. And it's really kind of emerged, and it's a really cool way to showcase all the stuff kind of happening in the entrepreneurial community in Madison, and it's really definitely grown from, I think, the first year we had 4 events, and now there's 34 events, and last year had about 3,000 people attend all across the different days.
Wow.
So it's definitely cool to see it kind of emerge as a bigger, more well-known event in Madison, but also then attract people from around the region and even around the nation, or know of it, which is cool. So, and
then like kind of on that same vein, so like, this is just they're not just, but that's a festival. It's like a short thing. Mm-hmm. Now you guys are getting involved with Starting Block, and that's like a much more permanent thing. Could you kind of briefly touch on what that is? Yeah, so Starting Block is basically it's going to be a 50,000 square foot entrepreneurial hub that'll be on East Washington Avenue, a couple blocks east of the Capitol, and the vision for that project started back in I think about 2012, and the idea was 100 State did not exist at the time. There was, I think Horizon co-working existed, but there was really nothing, like co-working was still like a pretty new thing. And so one of the core things was we wanted to build like sort of a entrepreneurial hub space that would sort of bring together a lot of startup activity and act as more of a physical central point for a lot of the stuff that was happening. And piece of that was around co-working, but the other 2 big things were around bringing together a lot of the long-term home for Sector 67 and Generator. So Sector 67 is a hackerspace out on the east side. They were and still are in need of a long-term home. Their current location is technically temporary, and then Generator has hopped around the different offices. I don't know the exact count. I think it's a lot over the last couple of years. And so finding a long-term home to kind of put those pieces together, plus a co-working, plus an office space component together in one spot, and then also have event kind of space as well, and have that as part of this what became the vision for Starting Block. And so that's been in the works now for 3+ years, and it's emerged as a very, very complicated big project. So it's now it'll be part of a mixed-use development on East Washington that's across from the Galaxy and the Constellation over there, and the city of Madison, as well as in particular AmFam, have come on board as big supporters of the project, and there's just a lot of moving pieces with it, but planning to break ground this year on it and help. I think the cool thing about that is it acts as a piece of infrastructure to really, basically a long-term infrastructure with the goal of really elevating and bringing Madison's entrepreneurial community to even the next level, and something that we can invest in and kind of just keep building on as we continue to build momentum as an ecosystem here. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know you guys have been planning that for since 2012. I've heard about it a little while ago, but I don't think people realize the amount of work and amount of so many steps that go along the way to getting a building project done. Yeah, I didn't realize that either. I thought it was going to take 9 months when we started the whole thing. It did not. So yeah, the magnitude it's a big project. Yeah. You're obviously big on communities and putting people together. Mm-hmm. How important to you is it that all of these functions of Generator and Sector 67, how important is it that all these functions are in the same building under the same roof? I think it's
think it's one valuable just from a proximity perspective, just to have these things next to like near each other, and just to have them as resources that are available to people that are in the building or nearby, so you can literally kind of go down the hall for help, or kind of have this stuff accessible nearby. And the really cool thing, one is just also very unique. Like, I don't think there is a kind of a space like that in particular has the hackerspace component plus accelerate, all those kind of things. And that was kind of a unique thing we decided to stick with as a constraint pretty early on in the process. Like, was to make sure we were mandating that Chris at Sector had to come along with us, because if we just did just a pure office space play, like that would have been a lot easier. And Chris, obviously, with all of his crazy equipment and stuff, presents some challenges. But that was a constraint we very intentionally kept. And so I think at the end of the day, even though it's a lot of work and it's taking a long time, once the doors open, it'll be a very unique space that I think will be really, really cool to have in Madison. And the other cool thing about it is just the density of stuff, density of this entrepreneurial stuff that's happening, and the fact that it's all downtown and near each other. Like, all of the other things that exist, 100 State, Horizon, all these other things that exist around town and around the Capitol and all the other startups and stuff, like that density is really, really awesome to have in this close proximity here regardless. And it's really cool how it's emerged as kind of around the square is like, this is the hub for these things happening. So I think that's the other cool part of it that'll be beneficial to the whole ecosystem, regardless of where you're at exactly. So
that is really cool. So like, what do you think, what do you hope for over the next 5-10 years with Starting Block? Like, what sort of things do you hope for out of that project? I
mean, I would say if it can help the existing startups be more successful and see more success, I think that's a big piece of it. If it can help new emerging startups become successful, I think that's a big part of it. And if it can help more people either stay in Madison or move to Madison and ultimately think of it as a great place for startups, and in particular tech startups on that side of it, and all startups as a whole too. If Madison's profile on that end, I think can be raised as far as like, this is a great place and this is a very unique place and there's a lot of cool things and good things happening. I think that'd be an awesome conclusion, or kind of a next step 5 years from now. So
that's great. Well, thank you so much for your work, and thank you so much for being here. I want to turn it over now to people from the audience. So if you have a question for Forrest, please raise your hand. We got a microphone. Again, no sound will come out of it, but we can pass this around. Greg will help you out.
Hi, I'm Ross. I've got a question about the freemium model. So the freemium model typically depends very greatly on the whales, the people that give lots of money towards the games. Has PerBlue created any sort of internal ethical standard to hold itself to in order to both continue to exist and make revenue, but to respect the fact that these people that are giving a lot of money might be giving at the edge of what is comfortable for their actual lives as far as psychological dependence to the game?
I mean, we try to make the game mechanics, I guess, fair. We don't have a lot. We don't have a lot of insight on as far as specific player demographics go. So we can't tell if if this person we don't know much about the individual person, what their livelihood is, what their personal financial situation is. But I think the game mechanics are fair. We try to make it as balanced and as even as possible, I guess, and make it so that it's not just you don't have to just pay money to play. It's a very delicate fine line and a balance that's very difficult to do. But I think it's a challenge. But I don't think there's any core ethical things that are super negative necessarily. We don't have any. I guess we approach it from more like a game mechanic perspective of what's going to work to make the game as fun as possible. That's kind of ultimately the metric we use and it's somewhat subjective, but the metric of fun, and making sure it's as fun as possible, making sure that it's it's going to work across the board, whether you pay money or whether you don't pay money into the game. So yeah.
Getting back to Starting Block, I come from a very small town just south of here, and we're working on trying to keep people in our community. What kind of advice would you have for someone who was working with economic development, trying to build a sort of space to keep younger people in that town, not to take away from Madison, because it's great and we'd love if they moved up here, but we're a 1,400 people farming community that has great talent that up and leaves as soon as they turn 18. Would you have any advice for trying to keep people closer to home?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts. So one is, I think the best thing that could happen for you guys is that Madison emerges as a even more global kind of player in innovation and tech and all this other kind of stuff that's kind of, we have a lot of traction in general, because a lot of times I think we think too small scale, especially at the kind of economic development perspective of like, it's my city versus this county versus this county, and Madison versus Milwaukee and Wisconsin versus Illinois. But at the end of the day, that does not matter. Like, it's in the global economy, which is where Blue plays, where a lot of the tech companies and all these newer companies kind of play, and essentially the whole economy as a whole of where it's going is it's global, and it's where you can be, how can you build a global city that matters and is relevant, and ultimately it kind of goes to the entire region of like the Madison broader region, and how can we make Madison a great place for, tech and startups and all this kind of stuff. And I think that ties back to like a smaller neighboring community as far as, what is your role, and what is your role in that piece of it, of like the Madison piece, I think is a piece of it. But then also, what would make, like, what is almost on the line of like, that you're going to be globally successful, like globally the best at. Like, why would people choose to stay in your community, as far as like finding those particular areas that like your community is best in the world at this, like this is what is the best piece about here, and it's kind of making sure people that are coming up and kind of, whether they're going through high school and going wherever else, like they have that core reason that actually ties them back, that they have an interest in why they want to move back or why they want to stay there, and making sure that there's a compelling sort of whole kind of feeder system of stuff that incentivizes that core kind of reasoning of why somebody should stay, kind of tying back to all those things that make it unique and essentially world best in class at whatever piece that may be. And it doesn't have to be the best in the world, but like kind of like making sure all those things kind of make sense and line up. If it's kind of convoluted, but high level.
Thank you for your time. It's been very helpful. My question is regards to when you were starting off, you're a group of programmers and engineers, and at one point you would have thought, I need to have other disciplines like marketing, legal help, operations, finance. How did you make that transition? How did you find those right people to kind of launch you further and actually kind of make it big?
Yeah, so those are really difficult those are really difficult points to get to and to realize that you're at, and to ultimately kind of comes down to like the founders are like the early stage people that are kind of taking on more responsibility out of their comfort zone or area of expertise, as like in my particular role, as like I would take on additional things that I was not an expert at, and kind of essentially, I guess it kind of goes back to your time is the most limited resource you have. And you need to spend your time on what is going to be the most ROI positive thing that you can be contributing to. And as your plate is full of other things that are not the best use of your time, and there are other important things that you should be doing that are more impactful and more important essentially for the company, we need to find ways to hand off those other things. And so whether that's kind of essentially how a role and a need for this other thing kind of comes from, essentially kind of where a job is created from, essentially, of this handing off of, I need somebody to fill this and do this responsibility and take it off my plate. And you can at that point decide whether you want to hire somebody for it, and essentially kind of have the decision of, I want to build this expertise in-house, and I want to have this as part of a core team that we're building, and I want to basically bring this person in-house and to fill this role, whether that's in marketing or any other kind of area that's not maybe core to like our background. And the other option is to kind of go, I want to find a service partner to like fill this role and serve this essentially. And I think that's kind of is the trade-off of whether you want to whether it makes sense for you to build this expertise internally as in your company, and there's like value to do that, or if you want to partner with somebody who's already an expert in it, and that's what they do, and I want to just partner with them to like let them be the best at what they do, and just kind of more of a service provider relationship on that. So it's kind of goes back to those things, and there's both of those are very complicated paths to find and source those and find the best at each of those, but that's kind of the high level. But
hi, I had a question about how you choose your next game. Mm-hmm. And you said that you look at the market and see what's successful, and then you take components of that return to your studio, I presume, and then constructs something around what has been successful. How do you come up with a product then that's not just a Me Too thing?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, a lot of it goes back to, it's not just taking something and just iterating necessarily. It's taking, it could, there's a lot of different variables in that, and you can't really have a completely like brand new, never before seen thing. Like that doesn't really exist to an extent, and so it's kind of really being selective on the risk that you're taking, really being selective on the innovation you're taking, and making sure you're smart about that level of both of those things, and just being at least acknowledging the amount. And so you can choose to make a product that is more iterative, or kind of like a Me Too approach. Like that's a very low risk option. And you can also choose the other end of that is, I'm going to just go sit in a room for 6 months and just make something that we think is cool. Like that's the other extreme. But you're going to have to find a balance in between that spectrum, and it's just a kind of a combination of balancing the risk and the innovation equations, and then knowing where you're falling, and whether that's part of your product portfolio mix as far as like your risk assessment, essentially your risk in your portfolio essentially for products, and then making the call of, we need to do something that's maybe not very innovative and much more much less risky, so we're going to go on the very less risky end. Or if you can afford and you want to do something much more innovative on more of the innovative end and more open-ended, and kind of finding the right place on that spectrum is kind of, it's just a balance of risk essentially. And so we have a balance that depending on we just want to make sure all of our products, we kind of know what that risk and innovation areas are, and making sure we're comfortable with that going forward essentially. This is how we look at our kind of the product pipeline and the roadmap going forward.
So thank you, Forrest, for your insights. When I hear your story, I'm encouraged by the fact that you're part of an ecosystem that is retaining a lot of talent and that is attracting a lot of talent. And I can't help but think about an analogy that in Silicon Valley, like PayPal, right? And the PayPal mafia.
Yep.
Right? And I'm not going to call you the Pure Blue Mafia. But one of the questions, I have a twofold question. One is, you probably don't have a problem attracting talent. You probably get a lot of resumes filled in, and you probably do some interviewing. What are the one or two characteristics that you look for in attracting talent? And then number two is, you probably have a lot of talent that are that good that at some point in time they decide to go off on their own. Can you speak about if you had any experiences where that has happened, and if what kind of businesses were launched as a result of that? Yeah,
so definitely on the what we kind of look for end as far as with employees and stuff, it's definitely on the passion. So like basically passion for if it's a technical or dev role, like just raw passion for programming and like technical stuff. Like that's the core piece of like what we want. And then an interesting game. So it's not games first, programming second. It's programming first, games second. Is kind of our, in particular on like the dev role, dev side of things. And I think the number two sort of attribute would be, I guess I'd call it like an entrepreneurial mindset essentially. So like somebody who can take initiative and take ownership of stuff is kind of the two big attributes that I would say is under the entrepreneurship piece. So basically the way our culture and what people function best at PurBlue are people who can are proactive, take the initiative, and then actually own, whether it's a small little task or a big thing or a whole project, and are very proactive about what they're doing. So I think those are the two kind of the big things on that end. And then as far as talent kind of coming out of PurBlue, I guess one direct example to that is so Drifty, the Ionic guys, Ben and Max actually were PurBlue employees originally, and then started Drifty, which is, I believe they've changed the name to Ionic, which is the Ionic framework. So it's for mobile app development. It's one of the top 50 open source projects in the world, and so they're based right here in Madison. They both worked at PurBlue, and now we're very much work with them a lot as far as from a peer role, and talk to each other. And the guys at Lightbank, who led our last investment round in 2014, actually led their rounds last year. And so there's I guess one example. So yeah, there are something like that had to happen too. So.
we can take one more question. Does anybody have a question? I got one if nobody does.
I just want to follow up on that. How challenging do you find it to actually recruit sort of the best of the best and keeping them here? You made mention that if the company was in San Francisco, it would probably look a little bit different. So what are your thoughts on actually, what does your pool look like, and do you get good talent here, and do you have challenges finding it?
Yeah, so there are definitely benefits to being here, and there are definitely challenges too, for sure. I think because of the university and a lot of the other tech stuff around town, we have access to a lot of really, really smart technical talent, but it tends to be on like the greener or younger side. And so, but that's something that we've been really good at, as far as like taking people younger who have a lot of potential and sort of training them up and kind of getting them through our, our process stuff, how our stuff works, and kind of up on our kind of tech stuff, and then have been pretty successful with that. And that's kind of one of the things we've realized is, being in Madison, we're really well positioned to have this unique access to this, direct access to this very strong young talent pipeline, which is very different from like in San Francisco, where a lot of the folks there are relocated from all over the country, and they don't have. I mean, they're obviously Stanford and that as well, but that can't feed the whole ecosystem that exists in the Valley. So I think just having that realization that this unique opportunity exists for this talent pipeline, like seeing that, and then making sure we take advantage of that and like leverage that essentially as a unique asset is really important. And that's been, I think one of the good kind of differentiators or competitive advantages we've had, and any tech company would have in Madison. And then also, we are wanting to attract talent from all over the country. And again, because we're in a global industry, we're building a global company, we want to make sure we have the best people in the world, ideally, at what they do. And so we have a pretty high standard as far as who we bring on board, and are want to find them, whether they're in Madison or San Francisco or anywhere in the country, basically. And so yeah, we've relocated people from all over. We just had a person start today from New York. Had people from all over the West Coast, all throughout the Midwest. I think most of our employees still have a Madison-related tie, but we're probably approaching half are relocated from all over. So yeah.
So last question. For Capital Entrepreneurs, do you guys have a date set for the next event?
So we're going to be hosting a celebratory social as part of the Transcend competition on campus. So that's a new awesome student innovation competition that's happening on the EW campus March 10th and 11th, I believe. And so we're going to be hosting a kind of a follow-up social following the awards and stuff for that. But then the other big event is the Spring Tech Kickoff. So that's the annual big Spring Tech kind of open social that we do. And so that, I believe, will be April 6th this year. So this will be I think the fourth annual one of that. And so last year we had about 400 or so people at that event, kind of a big open networking kind of event. We try to do it at like a new kind of brand new built out space that's not yet furnished or people moved into. So this year it'll be over at the Galaxy, right across from the Starting Block site actually. So it'll be in that space, which will be just opening in a few weeks here. So yeah, April 6th, and yeah, look for more info on capitalentrepreneurs.com, and you can sign up for our public event mailing list on there as well if you're wanting just to stay in tune with a lot of those like bigger events like that. And also if you're an entrepreneur that's based in or near Madison and not yet involved with Capital Entrepreneurs, it's free to join for all Madison area entrepreneurs. And you can also request to join on capitalentrepreneurs.com as well. So.
Okay, great. Well, everybody, please stick around. Remember, make friends, not contacts. Give, don't take, and help others before helping yourselves. Big thank to 100 State for hosting us. Big thanks to Field 59 for doing our video. And of course, thank you to Forrest. Round of applause for Forrest, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Thanks, man. Awesome. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.